Lights, camera, action. Today, we have as our guest Pete Chatmon. He's been a director for over the past 20 years. He came onto the scene, as I know it, in 2000 with the Sundance Selection 3D that he developed at the NYU Film School. I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong about that. But in recent years, quite a portfolio of episodic television in his current journey on projects and series titles like Silicon Valley, Grey's Anatomy, Blackish, Mixed-ish, Atypical, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and many, many more. I could not be more pleased than to have today's guest on Conversations with Charlie, Pete Chatmon. Hello, and how are you, bro?
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm good. It's Friday right now. You know, it's been busy, but trying to get through the to-do list. But happy to join you here on the podcast. Love what you're doing.
Yeah, and I believe I have not, but I must watch your podcast. You had a guest on who's a good friend of mine, Barry Brown.
Yeah.
I have to watch that episode. He's a close compadre. I mean, I've done over the years a fair amount of work with both him and Spike together.
Okay.
But he's been directing. In fact, he directed something this past year.
Yeah, we talked about that, and it's always fun, man. Just talk much like this, right? Just kind of talking to people that you work with or that you admire and respect, and kind of hearing how they have come to be where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, basically, I mean, I like to go through a variety of the roadmap from influences and reasons for getting to where we're going. But why don't we start right in the middle and the core of the dialogue, which I think is the most interesting, which is not a division, but really a working life, as I like to refer to it. And the working life that we have today is either in content creation for feature film or certainly short format content and advertising, or episodic television, which you're doing a tremendous amount of, and has sort of become kind of the core working possibility to continue creating a footprint as a director, because our world has transformed into an explosion of opportunity in the episodic world. So tell me a little bit about how you landed just getting into episodic television, because it wasn't that many years ago, was it?
Not at all. I did my first episode in 2017. Actually, the first one I booked was Blackish, and I'm prepping now for my 5th episode of that show. And so, I came to the conclusion and this wording of being platform agnostic. You know what I mean? Like, as all the industry kind of trends were shifting, and there was almost no definition of what content was in like the late aughts, as we call them. People, it was like when I came out of film school, it was like, you got to make a feature film. And everybody kept that target. But then it was like, well, the feature filmmakers are now going to TV, because all the films are from a comic book or some other IP. So now the more interesting voices are finding room on television. Then there was commercials and branded content and stuff being shot on phones or on film to be watched on phones. So my whole thing was like, where can I be a director? And it looks like everywhere. So let me focus on trying to make inroads in any possible place that I can direct. So that meant writing feature films. But on a more immediate level, that meant going after what I thought was the lowest hanging fruit, which would be branded content for small companies, because they need things to put on their website. They may not be able to pay for an ad campaign with a huge advertising agency, But here I am, working filmmaker, a little bit of a track record. We can make videos for you and help you have a fighting chance against the larger companies. And so I did that for about 6 years. And my dog was probably going to be doing that off and on. I did that for 6 years. And after a while, I got a little bit, what's the word? I don't know. Nostalgic for my own voice. And I had booked the biggest campaign to date for the company, which was something making Instagram videos for a Procter & Gamble campaign when Instagram first added videos to the platform. And I was like, let me just make something, see where I am, what it looks like with all these skills I've developed, shooting, editing, directing, producing. And I made a short film called Black Card that got picked up by HBO. And so that kind of brought me into these TV directing programs, shadowing on 10 different shows, 300 meetings. And overnight, I became somebody working in TV, I guess 18 years after graduating NYU with a film Sundance. So.
Yeah, I actually just started to watch. I was looking at a little playback of Black Card. I have to watch it all the way through. Beautifully done. Bravo. Yeah, wonderful. So getting a chance to hone the skills. Now, next thing is in TV, the where the rubber hits the road is being a hired hand as a director for what someone else writes.
Right.
And I always feel like a director on the way, the best choices are to be able, because we do collaborate, to be able to interpret someone else's script rather than to own the writing and the directing, but to own the directing and interpret the writing.
Yes.
What was your adventure like getting into television on the stuff that you have with the writing team and interpreting with them and collaborating with them? Because in a sense, every director somewhere in his soul is also a writer.
Right. Yeah. And, look, I've written 2 feature films and plenty of shorts. So I come from, there's a little bit, for any director out there listening, I think there's a button you have to turn off on yourself, right? Which is, you're not the sole authority on this thing. And in TV, oftentimes, like, I'm pitching shows, I'm working on shows that I've been working on for years as just concepts. And then, put that work aside. Let's just say you just only factor in, you could come up with an idea, presto changeo. You're still looking at 12 to 24 months before that thing comes on TV. And so now you're some director doing episode 3, trying to impose your idea of how this thing needs to be done. But they figured that out, or they had an idea about that for the past year to 2 years. So how do you respect what they do? It means that you have to dissect what they've done. And so my job is to look at, what is it that this story, that this show does? How have they historically done it? Or if it's a new show, how are they telling me they want to approach it? And then how can I add my unique vision into what they've already baked up? And it's knowing where you can do something new and where you have to honor just, this is how they shoot scenes like this, or this is how these actors are in moments like this. And it's a bit of a gas clutch, riding to figure out where you can elevate it. But the irony that I've learned, not irony, the thing that I've seen is that if you really respect the show in the beginning and just give them what they are expecting to get, then over time, you start getting a little bit more creative leeway. So now, like, I've done things on shows like this is my 5th Blackish, or, I've done I did 6 Grownish. I did 4 Always Sunny. And like the more that they get comfortable with you, the more you can be like, hey, like Rob, I think this might be a cool way to approach it. And they might be like, you know what, we didn't think about it like that, but we know you know what we're trying to do. Let's go for it. So it's a fun time, but respecting the writer is key.
Am I also right in the TV world for episode by episode,
Mhm.
as a scene, if you watch any of the series, you're jumping director to director. So you're handing off an episode that you've done, and then the next episode might be by another director, but it's a seamlessly told story. So you're going back and forth. I've never really spoken to any of the episodic directors about what that process is, or if it actually is a process. That's another curiosity, I think, right? Because TV is very collaborative, and there are not necessarily, it's not actual serial directors, but serial episodes.
Right. Yeah, you're trying, like the directors, the only thing we ever really kind of converse about is like, hey, what's it like on set? Who's acting, what are the conflicts with people? What kind of fires do I need to avoid? But other than that, it's like, it's more of it's almost like looking at it as a finished piece of work and saying, how do I replicate that? Or how do I keep it creatively on the track? Because even now, like I'm doing the 15th episode of Blackish this season, and only 8 have aired. So I've watched all 8. Now I have to email them today actually, but I'll assume there's probably maybe 2 or 3 cuts that I can watch. So let's say that gets me to episode 9, 10, and 11. And then, 12, 13, and 14 will just be scripts that I'll have to read. And I have to track what's going on in these stories, because sometimes, there's a joke in my script that I don't actually know what it means, or I don't know the full value of it because it started in a story in episode 12. Or oftentimes, like I'll read something in a script and I'll have to ask the writer, like, yo, what's going on here? This seems like these people might be getting together. And they'll be like, oh yeah, in episode 20, that's going to be a new relationship. And so, for instance, last year, I did this episode where Pops and Ruby, Lawrence Fishburne and Jennifer Lewis's characters kind of rekindle. And then this season, they got married, and they told me that it was leading toward that.
Right. So you're given insight into the long-term Bible of the show.
Exactly.
Which is so critical. So tell me a little bit about each of these shows that you've worked on. You've also worked on Silicon Valley. How did that come about?
So the thing that's super interesting, and it should be known, but I like to underline it. It's all about relationships. So in 2015, the very first show that I ever shadowed on, the very first TV set I ever stepped on to watch TV being made was Silicon Valley in season 3. And, to condense the story, I just kept in touch with the people that were my point people. Every time they had a project, I'm reaching out saying, hey, I love the new show, or I saw you got a pilot greenlit over here, or maybe there's an update about something I've done. And so I ended up interviewing for an episode of Insecure a few years later. And my point person from when I shadowed was now a co-EP on Insecure. And so while I didn't get that job, I did end up getting an Insecure episode the following season. And so now we had a working relationship. And they always knew that I was interested in Silicon Valley as a show. So cut to, I guess, May 2019, I'm on my honeymoon and I'm on a FaceTime call with the guy that I had met with, who was now an EP, and Mike Judge, so Jim Cleverweiss, Mike Judge, and Amy Salomon, and we're just on this call, and I'm in Bali at some hotel for our honeymoon, and basically I was like, wow, I this relationship that I've kind of nurtured is really paying off, because now he's vouching for me. But to tie it all into a bow, when I did my Always Sunny episode, Rob McElhenney had asked me like what was up next. And I was like, oh, I'm doing Silicon after this. And he was like, okay, cool. Because Alec Berg had called him to see like, what's it like working with that guy. So it's relationships and ones that you know, ones that you don't know that you're kind of developing specifically, but people vouching for you and saying, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, the perennial 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah,
Literally.
yeah. But that was an awesome show. That was a great time.
Cool stuff. So the producers of Blackish, Grownish, Mixedish, there are many issues that they do. Tell me about that relationship. It seems to be a real core for you, and how that began. It
was the first show I shadowed on. I was in this Disney ABC program, and so I shadowed on Blackish. And like I mentioned, my first episode that I was like, the first person that told me, okay, we're going to hire you, was Kenya Barris. So Blackish is the universe. All the issues are from the Blackish universe that he created.
Right.
And so, I finally kind of had that. I don't even know if it was a stamp, but I had a little bit of a flag in the ground, right? And so then they greenlit Grownish, and so before I ever directed the first one I got booked for, they greenlit Grownish, which was a spinoff with Zoe, Yara Shahidi's character, going to college, and I got penciled in for one of those. So that was actually the first one that I physically directed. And so I was fortunate to go from Grownish to Blackish. Grownish invited me back after my first episode ever. So now in like the span of really September to November, I had 3 episodes of TV. From there, it just kind of, it kept going. They were happy with what I had done for Grownish. And so the season 2, they gave me a 2-episode block, which was basically the 1-hour premiere. And then Blackish invited me back for 2 episodes in season 5, and it just kind of kept going from there. And I think what it really came down to is, like we talked about in the beginning, understanding the show, showing that it was in good hands, being a calm presence on set, and delivering a good episode.
Yeah. And the guys that you work with, the crew, are the cinematographers consistent that you get a chance to work with? You develop a really good relationship with those guys, I would guess, right? And then in terms of the other shows that you've been able to do, I've never seen Station 19. I haven't seen The Last OG or any of your other shows. How did those, talk a little bit about the other shows that you've done outside of this sort of core?
Yeah, it's in, the big challenge for any director is moving between mediums, right? So like all the 2 feature films I did and all the short films and branded content kind of were non-existent trees in the forest to the people who do television. So then getting into television, it was like, how do I get a single camera comedy? And so that was really the focus. But I knew that I also wanted to do more than that. I wanted to do dramas, because everything that I've ever done has kind of been a dramedy. So I didn't want to just become a one-note kind of director. And I also wanted to work in premium cable, things on HBO and Showtime, and I also wanted to do broadcasts and just wherever interesting stories might be, and action as well. So what I was fortunate to do was shadow on some shows that offered that opportunity for the 1 hours. Much like there's a TV is very much about families. More often than not, I find like people have multiple shows, whether it's one universe or just a whole bunch of shows. Like if you're able to work with different folks, you can find yourself doing a variety of shows. So, Always Sunny was from the same folks that I did Mythic Quest, which is for Apple TV. Mythic Quest was created by Rob McElhenney and Charlie Day. So, doing Always Sunny with them was a way to kind of branch off there. Rob kind of put that final recommendation for me for Silicon Valley. I shadowed on Grey's Anatomy and ended up directing a Grey's Anatomy. And with that, Station 19 is part of Shondaland's universe. So I got to direct one of those. I really wanted to do something that had a little more action. I hadn't done anything with fire. So they liked the work that I had done on Grey's, and I had all the meetings that you have to have, and people were interested in bringing me over there. And it's, I'm just constantly looking to expand the kind of stories I'm getting to tell and build up my craft so I have an arsenal of skills to do whatever project might come around. So like now I'm trying to book some superhero stuff, and add that to the toolkit.
Yeah, that stuff's really popular for sure. So tell me about I think is it a feature script, $1 free?
Free 99.
Free 99.
Yeah. Free 99 is a project I co-wrote with my frequent co-writer and collaborator, Candace Sanchez McFarland. I won the 2008 Tribeca All Access Creative Promise Award with that project. So that was like folks who had made their first feature and were looking to make their follow-up. Tribeca had a program and a competition, and I won that section of it. And it's a heist film, with a little bit of historical fiction, a little bit of action, but a heist that takes place in a small town. And we kind of watch a little bit of history unearthed over the course of this one day.
Cool. So, you have that sort of in the cooker, and with all these things, you always have to have a lot of irons in the fire. On the side of your episodic world, I haven't had a chance to look at your podcast, which is Wednesday morning. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, we did. I wanted to do a short film around the election. And then inspired by all the crazy shit going on once, COVID hit and was not given the proper attention. And it became clear to me that I wouldn't be able to do it as a short film unless I absorbed all the costs connected to having a COVID protocol production. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to not make this project. And that kind of goes back to this idea of being platform agnostic. It's like, I got something to say. How do we say it? And so we made a narrative podcast, and it was actually pretty freeing, basically a radio drama, to cast a bunch of really talented actors. My wife is the star of it. We got Coleman Domingo from Fear the Walking Dead, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Spencer Garrett. We got Louis Ozawa, Joy Nash. So we put together a really awesome cast, and over a weekend in like 2-hour blocks, we recorded this podcast and put it out. And it's basically an exploration of a kind of surreal what if scenario if a autocratic dictator-like leader were to win a second term, and it's the Wednesday morning after that victory. And it was kind of like a little bit of Buñuel's discreet charm of the bourgeoisie, updated for today. So it was real fun.
Cool. Interesting. Yeah, I'm fascinated by, there's so much production that goes into the what I like to call the almost the reinvention of the radio play, right?
Yeah.
So this is a whole form of content that's out there that is without a COVID restriction, as we know.
Exactly.
As you know, you're in the middle of all of that now in production.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was fun. I recommend it. There's no reason not to make something, whether it's on your iPhone or, you know, you're recording it somewhere. Like, just make, because it's the only way you're gonna get your skills up.
So true. So true. So in terms of what you're looking forward to in your career, now that you've sort of set a foundation in episodic television, are there series that you've developed with a Bible yourself? Not that you can talk about those, but
yeah, you know, it's funny. Like the irony of all of this is that, look, a lot of what you're trying to do as a director or an artist is like survive, right? Like, how do you make enough money, A, to survive, and B, to make the projects that are dearest to you, right? And that can unfold in a variety of ways. But you know, the thing I mentioned, Free 99, like I'm considering turning that into a narrative podcast, because it'd be cheaper to make that than to raise, you know, $8 to $10 million in a world where that money is not even being allocated toward films anymore. And it's not coming from some IP. It's not necessarily an episodic thing, but you know, it's been proven to me that the narrative podcast world is lucrative, and it can be episodic in smaller chunks. I have another show that started as a feature film that we are pitching now. Just had a successful pitch yesterday. We'll see what happens. And then I actually got hired to join a show that Lionsgate has been developing and is out pitching. We had a pitch earlier this week, so I would be, in that case, directing the pilot and multiple episodes, most likely, and be a EP, executive producer on it. So, you know, still just wherever the good stories are, I'm trying to be.
right. And in the TV world, there's the hired hand aspect of directing, and then there's sort of the showrunner aspect, or owning the IP, which I guess is one of the goals, right? In the TV world, yeah.
Right.
So for you, I the thing I don't know about, we've known each other for a number of years on and off in social and film circles, but I don't know much about your background. You were born in New York City, and how did you develop your life and your interest actually in wanting to do what we do today?
Yeah. I was born at Lenox Hill Hospital, which is there's a very good documentary about
Lenox Hill.
Yeah, and we watched that during quarantine. But that's where I was born. And you know, we moved to Jersey. We lived in Brooklyn. We moved to Jersey, you know, for early enough that that's where I did kindergarten, right? And so I grew up in this town, South Orange. Our sister town was Maplewood. We shared a high school, Columbia.
Where my kids went to school.
At Columbia.
They're Columbia grads, both of them.
Look at that.
Kind of funny.
Yeah, I was, and so, you know, look, when I was there, I hope these programs still exist, but when I was there, I took a Super 8mm filmmaking class. I took the photography course, and we had the public access TV station network run through the studio we had at the school. And so, you know, I was kind of the film guy 2 years ahead of me, Zach Braff was like the TV guy. And also in his class, Lauryn Hill was the everything gal. And so I had a teacher, George Chase, who had gone to NYU. And all of his anecdotes were initiated with when I was at NYU. And so I was like, well, I guess if you go to film school, that's where you go. And I looked up the folks who had gone there, and I was like, well, shit, I like Spike Lee and Oliver Stone and Scorsese and Chris Columbus and whatever. So that was the only place that I applied. But the thing that inspired me first was Do the Right Thing. It was the first film I saw where I was like, this is entertaining, but it's also reflecting something that I know and experience, which was monumental, because more often than not, I was going to things and just like watching some other world that someone had decided was, valuable enough for me to be entertained by or brought into. And to see a world that I knew was refreshing. And in the 11th grade, when I picked up the camera, which was awesome. It was Super 8 film. We were developing it ourselves in the lab, like in the back of the classroom. It was awesome, man. And I remember shooting an exercise where when I cut it together and screened the film, Mr. Chase was like, you made all the right decisions in there. Like even in just like condensing time and like shot selection and doing these things. And it was all instinctual. And so the affirmation there kind of, I had fun doing it, but the affirmation that it was like reflective of kind of understanding what the language of the art was or is, was affirming enough for me to say, this is what I'm going to do.
Cool. And what about your family? Tell me about your mom and dad, your background and their lives. Do they have any odd connections, or is there any connection in your lineage to your world?
Nah, there's no, I mean, look, if they were, as far as it works, for parents of my generation, even if they wanted to be some kind of artist, that shit wasn't no option. You know what I mean? Like it was do better than how we did being their parents. And that's going to be, going to school or getting a job and providing for your family. And so, I to this day, I wonder how difficult a decision it was to be like, hey, I want to be a filmmaker and I want to go to this really expensive place where I'm going to be in, but all I got was support. But my mom is from Newport News, Virginia. My father from Birmingham, Alabama. I got to experience both of those worlds every summer growing up. So, I got a very clear idea of the spectrum of Blackness, because each of those cities was drastically different from returning home to New Jersey. The cities were different, the family members were different, the things we did were different, but they were informing. And so, they were both, working professionals in the world, trying to, survive in a world where it wasn't really designed for them to thrive.
Right on. And do you feel that from your childhood growing up that you pull any of what you had in your life into what you do as a director in the TV world?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I think that, you look back and you recognize that the things that might have been challenging or things you didn't want to do, or maybe things that were uncomfortable, are actually forming the person you're going to be. Like I was watching, damn, I don't remember the title of it, but I do a lot of, like, when I'm working, so I put stuff on Netflix that's like documentary, so I don't feel like I have to watch it, but I can hear it. And it was a series about coaches, and it was really interesting to hear, like, Serena Williams' coach talk about how quiet he was, almost to the point where he's like, I went to therapy for a year. And if you think that I'm over exaggerating, it took a year before I said one word to the therapist, right? And what I got from that, though, is that I would study people and I would look at, you know, what is it that they're doing? What is it that they're not saying? And he was like, and that's what makes me a great coach, because I'm not listening to what they're saying, I'm listening to what they're doing. And so for me, just kind of growing up, it was like watching, living in a town that was trying to be diverse, but having challenges with that. I had friends who had crosses burned in their front lawns, you know, in the 1980s.
Wow. In
You
Maplewood,
know,
South Orange. How
in
about
Maplewood
that?
and South Orange.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, I had, I would get pulled over by the police because I'd drive my mom's car and maybe they didn't think that I should be in that car. And I also had dreads down to here at that point, you know? And so I moved between, you know, I had friends in East Orange and Newark, and then I have friends up in Livingston, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like I got a really, between that and Virginia and Alabama, I got a really clear understanding of what it means to be on the cards you can be dealt based off of who you are in the country. And that's valuable stuff to pick up, because when I go from show to show, or I'm directing my own things, like, you're dealing with a lot of different psychologies. And the more that you can understand what you're receiving and not respond to it with, you know, anger or judgment or, you know, fill in the blank, the better off you'll do.
It's so important, right? I mean, I feel blessed to have been able to raise both my kids in that township. They were both Maplewood, born and not well. My son born and raised, my daughter raised, and went through the school system there. And it is just a remarkable and diverse background that you get a chance to exist in. That's, you know, 18, 20 miles outside of New York City, but you're in this town that is really the full spectrum of everything, from both the not just racial diversity, but gender diversity, and
right.
And you know, my daughter had a lot of friends who had you know, parents with two moms or two dads, and I mean,
right.
there was no version of life that was not around you. Yeah.
Right. And you know, it's even also crazy. It's like, I played soccer. Like, that shit was crazy. Like, to people that, like, you play soccer? It's like, yeah, we love soccer. We had a national Hall of Fame inducted coach.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? And it's just like, but that little thing, like, I was liking soccer and playing soccer before it was like, let's watch the World Cup, you know? And little things like that are formative in kind of showing you there's more than what people might expect of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let's not forget the little known fact that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that Ultimate Frisbee was developed in Maplewood or South Orange or both.
Wait, what is that?
The little known sport, Ultimate Frisbee.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, developed in the, I believe, in Maplewood. Tell me some stories about your episodic journeys. You've told me how you got in.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like from day one when you get on a gig, mm-hmm, to getting on set and starting to direct? Talk about how you tear it apart, how it works, and what it's been like. Yeah.
So I think that taking the feature film experience, your job is to become the authority, right? That's what authorship is. And so when I moved to television, I recognized that I was not the authority, obviously. I'm there to assist in the storytelling while bringing my unique vision to it. But at the same time, I have to try and get as close to authority level as I can. And so that means I've got to, you know, and I'll preface that it differs show to show. I just did the mid-season finale for Grey's Anatomy. They've got 17 seasons. You might prep differently for that show than a show in season 2, because I say watch every episode. Sometimes you can't do that shit. It's too many, you know, and unless you have a month of free time, you're not going to be able to watch 365 42-minute episodes of a show. But that said, the first thing I do, let's just say the given is I will have watched all episodes possible and read every script possible to bring me up to date for the current season. Then I kind of hop into, I go through reading the script as every production head. So I'll read it as, the first read will be just as a person, as a civilian, to kind of see how it washes over. Then, you know, my next read, I'll do it as production designer, and I'm making notes on any production design elements. On a show on a stage, those notes may be non-existent because it's the Johnson family house kitchen on Blackish, or Bo and Dre's room, or Stevens and Leto office conference room. Like, there's nothing really for me to decide there. But if there's maybe something that's on location, I might make a note of what I'm looking for, based off of achieving what the writer wrote. Then I'll read it as wardrobe, costume designer. I'll read it as a second AD. I'm thinking, oh, it says party. How many background do we need? How many background do they typically pay for? I'll read it as the DP. Is there any special equipment that stands out to me? Because if I've watched the entire show, I know that maybe they're just on the dolly in studio mode for day-to-day stuff, but I want to go on a crane for this moment. So I'll make a note of that and say, I think scene 12, I'd like to have a crane. I just did a shot in an episode I directed where I was like, oh, you know what? I want to have the camera push in, but do a full rotation as it moves in. And so in prep, I'm like, hey, DP, can we pull this off? You know, and then she'll take that back to her department and to the line producer to get a budget and see if it works for the numbers, right? So I do all of those things before I actually sit down and look at it as a director. Because if I'm directing, that's where the job starts. It's not me lathering on shots and you know, motivations. It's me aggregating all of the different departments to communicate something, and then putting cameras on that, and then directing actors toward that. And so you know, I'm just constantly reading. And once I've done that, I also make a spreadsheet breaking down the episode into the various storylines. So, you know, it might be a story is, I keep using the same show because it's on my mind, but the A story might be Bo and Dre argue about her not working. And then the B story might be Junior stands up for himself at school against the bully. And then the C story might be something else. And so I'll just go through the script and put all the scenes from each storyline in the proper column, because what happens is I've got to track this the entire shoot. And so an actor might say, wait, they might have a thought or a question, or might have an impulse to do something. And then I can always be like, well, the last scene we did this, the last time we were with you in your storyline, you were here. So I'm doing all of these things to become the authority, ending with blocking diagrams, where the camera's going, where I think the actors are moving and when, and then being prepared enough to know that on the day, they may not want to do that shit. So I've got to still be able to adjust to what they are inclined to do, or what adjustments they might have for what I've worked out, and still make the day, and kind of just answer 1,000 questions every day.
And do you have a very defined compositional shooting script and storyboard, or is it not really done that way for your shows?
I'll have a storyboard artist if it's something that is pretty unique or challenging or time sensitive and or logistically involved. So it would benefit us to know exactly what each frame is, because we're spending money. So like when I did Silicon Valley, it opens with this Mad Max kind of car scene where cars are being blown up and this guy's on a motorcycle and all this wild shit. And so that we storyboarded because we had from 11 to 5 to shoot all of it. And so that was super specific. But when it's not that, I'll get the digital floor plans from the production designer. And then I use an app called Hollywood Shot Designer, where I can lay the cameras over the floor plan and put characters, which are basically circles that I can name. And then I can basically lay out where they're moving and where the cameras are. And I'll pass that on to the DP and the AD so they can schedule accordingly. And it's a lot different than feature films, where a lot of times you walk on and you're like, and you scratch your chin and you figure the shit out. But like in this case, you've got so many people who are waiting for this kind of guidance, but also they don't know that you're efficient or going to be able to do the job. And this is also a way to get them to kind of exhale and say, okay, he's got a plan. Cool. Even though oftentimes I might not even shoot 50% of what I've prepared, it lets folks know there's an approach here from which we can stray.
Cool. I'm sorry that I'm not familiar with that program. To describe that Hollywood shot design. Sorry to get back to that. I'm interested in that. I'm always interested in learning about new things.
Yeah, I'll pull up a little screen grab of it actually. But yeah, it's called Hollywood Shot Designer. Let me see what I got here. What's open in here? I'll show you two things. So this is one where I have laid in different elements. So I put like the ambulance and where we are in this breezeway here, and I have where the characters are going. I did that because sometimes it's difficult to lay all of this on a grid, but then there are times where, for instance, this is in an emergency room. And so I've placed, you see where the characters are coming from and where the cameras are moving and who's where. So I'll have shared that with everyone before we shoot, the DP, the AD. So, everybody has the specificity that they need, because even with that, if I plan it out well, they can say, okay, so we're never going to look this way. We can pull that wall early. So then we can get into the scene and save 10 minutes. And 10 minutes could be 4 takes. Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. I love it. So in your journey now with all the shows that you've done, tell me, I always like to hear a good story about something memorable for you that you would feel okay sharing about a show that you were on that was either a funny incident, a happy accident, anything that has to do with your journey as an episodic director.
I would say one of the first things that in my slow transition to really, like, there's theoretically understanding something, and then there's the act of doing it, right? And so one of the early things that I remember noticing is like, I'd have an inclination to be like, hey, let's try one like this. And an actor is like, I've done fucking 120 episodes. I ain't trying that shit. I know it doesn't work, right? So you would get the occasional brushback, because in film, you're used to like the exploration of it, right? But sometimes on TV, they've explored it and they figured it out and they know what's needed and what's worked and what will work, because they know what they do and then they see what airs. They might have tried what you're saying 18 times and it never made the cut. So why would they do another take of it? And so I remember transitioning to using not let's try when I had a note, but what do you think of this, right? And so it's this little pivot, right? But for me, I kind of felt you just have a natural reaction when somebody's like, no, I don't want to try that. You're like, some of you, it was kind of like, fuck you too, you know what I mean? And so I started doing it in that way. And I was like, okay, cool, this is much better. And so I remember doing a scene, and of course, all of my anecdotes are from the same show because it's top of mind, but I was doing a scene and I had asked Mr. Lawrence Fishburne what he thought about something. And he's like, I don't think I would do that. And I was like, cool, you know? And so on the fourth take, he tried what I asked. And I was like, that's directing. Because to impose it would not have worked. I don't know, you know, I've never asked like what the process was. I don't know if it was, I was being humored, you know what I mean? Or I don't know if after 3 takes, it was like, you know what, that is a good option to explore, but it happened. And it was kind of an affirmation for this thing that I had pivoted to as far as a tactic.
Interesting. I love it. I love it. And do you feel that for you now, having done as much television as you have, I would imagine you have a sort of a hunger to do a lot of different types of stuff as well. Are you continuing to go outside of episodic and still to do your branded content or other types of video content? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, the branded content has kind of trickled off. I do have commercial reps now, so I've done, like I did a National Spectrum commercial. I've been up for a bunch of other commercials. The thing that kind of keeps happening is the dates are never as firm as I would need them to be with the TV calendar, because let's say like I know right now I'm doing a show from February 3rd to March 24th. I'm doing 2 episodes of a show. And a commercial might come up and say, oh, they're looking to go late January, early February. And so you're like, great. Like if that shit can happen before February 2nd, like I'm in. And then, but they never do. And so they tend to end up sliding, and then your availability becomes a conflict. But I love doing commercials because it's just I love to work that muscle of selling things visually and quickly, and telling a story in a different kind of packaging. So I'm hoping to do more of those. And you know, I have a feature film that I need to write when I get a little bit of downtime. And my goal has kind of been, how can I make things small enough that I don't have to be on the other side of someone's permission, you know? Like I made both of my features without that. Now that shit wasn't easy, but you know, I raised $500,000 from 35 people to make my first feature.
Which was premium?
That was premium.
Yeah.
And so, you know, not easy in any sense of the word, took 6 years, but it happened. And I've never been someone that wants to wait, you know, like if there's an opportunity to get money from industry sources, great, but I'm also not going to have that be the only way that it can happen. So when I get back to this script, it's something that will be contained enough that hopefully I can pay for it myself, or it's small enough that I can cobble together the resources for it. And the beauty of the television work is that I'm meeting and actually working directly with some of the people I want in that feature. So it all kind of becomes a handshake of business and art to hopefully do what I always wanted to do, which is tell stories that put Black folks in the center of the frame and not on the periphery, you know?
Cool. And for you, you're since you're of the generation somewhat similar. I think we talked a little bit about it, of around the same age as Reed Morano. You guys are sort of coming up at the same time. Who are your contemporaries that do you have relationships with your contemporaries, talking about what it's like to be on the scene now? And then following that, I'd like to chat a little bit about what all of our mutual fears are, which is what the hell's going to happen to theatrical features.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But tell me a little bit about, I mean, do you have a sort of a network of people that you share your war stories with in that are contemporary directors and artists that you stay in contact with?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you mentioned Reed Morano. She was one of the first people I met at NYU at Goddard Hall when we moved into our dorm, and she was in my second year sight and sound film class. So I knew her when she was, most interested in shooting anything that anybody would let her. And now it's beautiful to see that she's directing and creating shows and all that good stuff. So, some folks, it's like we have our mutual kind of social media support and comments on things, which in this day and age is kind of how you keep in touch. I have a kind of thread of directors that we are there to support each other, and many of them are folks that I have admired, and now they're friends and colleagues. Some are people that I've known and I've watched their journey. A buddy of mine, Seeth Mann, was in the grad program at NYU while I was in the undergrad. And I watched him go from this short film, 5 Deep Breaths, that he did, to directing The Wire and then directing Grey's Anatomy. I actually watched him do some of the programs that I did. And then transition into, he did 5 episodes of Homeland. So I've watched that journey, and him in particular was an inspiration for me to say maybe TV is a target that I should be focused on. But yeah, it's really been nice just watching folks that I've worked with or that I've known, some closer than others, become the people that now I get to see them at award shows and be like, man, I remember when we were in the elevator at Tisch. And now, some are actors, some are winning Golden Globes, and it's like, man, that's awesome.
It's fantastic. So not that I always need to land in the same spot at different moments in my podcasts, but I cannot have a podcast without talking about the thing that I love, which is the cinema. Mm-hmm. And it's taken a good heavy punch to the chin since the pandemic shutdown. Talk to me a little bit about the conversations that you have now with people that you know in the industry, and what your feelings are about the future of that portion of our medium of also effectively being social and being in an environment where you're going to a public place and not holed up watching at home.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's so many. You're about to just get some free thought, because I haven't really formulated all my thoughts on it, but I have found, so it's probably going to be a lot of statements that maybe total a point of view, but I have found that with the pandemic, I don't have the same desire to go out and do things anymore. And I wonder if it will return. So like, I don't really feel the need to like spend all the money I was spending going out to restaurants. I found out that I can cook. Like, I'm pretty good. My wife's better, you know? And we have a really good setup in our living room with TV and surround sound. I'm like, this is pretty awesome. So when you see things like, I think it was Warner just announcing that they're doing a kind of date release of for theatrical and home with all of their stuff moving forward or something like that. Part of me is like, you know, yeah, I feel like there's been an opportunity lost to make money, because if like take something like Tenet or Bond, you know, like I would have paid a ton of money to watch those at home, you know? And is that a potential new model? I don't know. I think the big challenge is the amount of money that it costs to make these films and then to market those films, and the idea of what merits that budget and that financing getting smaller and more particular, for me, has made movies less interesting, because I'm not a big comic book person per se, where the only shit I want to see is a comic book movie. I want to see some of these, like Mank on Netflix, right? I think that just like, I'm going to watch that ASAP.
Yeah.
And that should be a movie in theaters, but they would never make that anymore. So, you know, I hope that there's a way to maybe redefine how these things are paid for and what makes them financially successful. Because if they keep going in the way where everything has to be a big event or from another property, I don't know. And that means it's going to be more important or very important for them to be seen in mass gatherings. I don't know what the answer is going to be to that. I don't know how much of an answer that is. But I will say, in kind of closing on that thought, is that whether it's like the students I used to teach, or even now, you know, folks that are even older than me who are now dealing with the pandemic realities of now, how do they get their content? What seems to not matter anymore is what a thing is. It's just like, how do I get it on my tablet? How do I get it on my TV, on my phone? Folks don't care where it originated. They don't care if it's a movie, quote unquote, or if it's a TV show, or if, you know what I mean? They just care, how do I watch this shit? And I think that that's kind of freeing. But I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that's for certain is that at least currently, for production, because you're on them, there are legions of COVID personnel. So that's sort of become the new normal on set. And you're shooting stuff. You've been in production, right? Through all this. Yeah, it's just as our reality continues, all of these components of non-arena, non-theatrical, all home, and all sort of enclosed and protected. But yet at the same time, we continue to make fantastic new content. And I think we're all blessed to be able to continue working under the constraints that are current.
Right.
And, you know, yeah, I mean, God bless. I mean, it's to me, I'm a big fan of the cinema. So I always like to do I like to get a temperature check, but I understand completely when people feel that the sense of going to the theater and the environment that it is a petri dish for the virus. So,
yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like it's currently become an environment of fear. And I hope that the day comes that changes, but I certainly understand it now. This has been fantastic, Pete. Thank you so much for joining me on
Thank you for having me.
Conversations with Charlie. All right, man.
All right.
Everyone, talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right.